that. Okay, all right. So there is one consent item which I do have a pecuniary interest because a family member owns real estate close to that project. I'll have Councillor Ioannidis take that item, and then I'll come back to item number 3 for Shanley Street. Oh, there is an item first, yeah. Okay. Perfect. That's a request for federal home energy retrofit incentive. It's been moved by Councillor Galloway Seelock, as she said first. Any questions? Councillor Gazzola. Well, if you press your... I'm sorry, do you want to try the mic right beside you? Because I don't have any controls any longer.
Is this a test? I'm just curious as to why our recommendation, we're sending it to the Prime Minister, why we wouldn't be circulating it via AMO and FCM to everybody. It's something that affects, I guess it affects everybody in the province, right? At least why wouldn't it go to AMO so that other municipalities would get on board and join in?
Well, it's fair enough. If you feel so interested, I'm sure there could be an opportunity for you to add that as an amendment. If staff there doesn't seem any comment other than the fact that, again, the higher funding source is the federal government. That's why the intent of the motion. But if you feel it should be circulated through AMO or FCM or to the province as well, that's up to you.
It's a good motion. It just seems ridiculous that we wouldn't circulate it and get as many municipalities on board.
Again, like all
400 municipalities asking for something better than just one.
Like many of the motions, we have opportunity to improve it. If you like to move the...
I will add that as a motion as an amendment whenever the time comes.
Can you clarify exactly what your amendment would
I'm
be?
asking that in addition to sending that to the Prime Minister, I would not circulate it to other municipalities or to AMO to ask them to support it also. Isn't that sort of a routine we do all the time? No?
It's not a good day. That's fine. If you're asking a question why we're not doing that, you have an opportunity to improve that motion, and you are, I'm assuming, you've said that you want it to be circulated to other municipalities as well as through AMO.
Right.
Okay. I don't see anyone asking for that to be written, so I'll take that as an amendment. It's been moved. I don't see any other questions or comments, so I'll take the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. And on the main motion, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. And on to item number 2, which is the 114-120 Victoria Street South. That will be taken by Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you. So we'll be dealing with item number 2, dealing with 114-120 Victoria Street South. We don't have a presentation, and so Councillor Galloway Seelock moves it. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. That was good.
All right, on to item number 3, which is the 152 Shanley Street Vision Statement, and then there is a presentation. Tanya? Tina, sorry. Tina, again, whenever you're ready, okay. Please continue. And if there are questions of staff, we want to hold that off. There are 4 delegations, and then afterwards we'll come back to staff. And just put your hand up, and I will take the order of the questions. Thank you, and proceed.
Great, thank you. Good evening. I'm here to talk about the vision statement that we developed for 152 Shanley Street. In April and May of 2017, the city advertised the sale of this property under a formal tax sale process. Unfortunately, that tax sale was unsuccessful. So on October 30th, 2017, there was direction from committee and council to hold a neighborhood design charrette to come up for a vision for the property. That design charrette was held on Saturday, April 28th. We had approximately 67 persons in attendance. It was very well attended, and many of the tables came up with their own design concepts for the site, and were able to present those to those in attendance. From May to August, we worked on preparing a draft vision statement. And then on September 5th, we met with neighborhood representatives and showed them the vision statement. And since they were having a neighborhood event in their neighborhood on September the 8th, we asked them to take the vision back to them and neighbor to neighbor discuss what the city had come up with for the site. On September 27th, we held a community engagement session, and in that session we had about 25 persons attend. And there were lots of questions and answers, and we were able to present the vision that we had come up with, and a lot of good discussion at that meeting as well. We took the comments back, and we made some revisions to that vision statement in October, and tonight we're presenting that final vision statement for you for approval. The vision statement contains 4 components. There is a preamble, and it talks about the why and the how, and has parameters and objectives. It really outlines the opportunities and the constraints that we had to work under in terms of developing this vision statement. So it's an important component of the vision statement itself. The second part is the actual text, and so it describes the vision statement. It has the clear statement of uses and urban design principles, and it does specify a maximum height for the site. The third part of the vision statement are the concept drawings, and these are the visuals. And with the help of Adam Clark, he was able to, well, not the help, he did the visuals himself, and he was able to create a great concept that actually illustrated what we heard at the design charrette. And then the fourth part of the vision statement are the attachments. So what we did was attach all the drawings and the text and everything that was developed at the design charrette, and we attached that at the back of the vision statement. So there were some clear design principles that came out of the design charrette. They were clear in terms of the majority of the people that were at the design charrette. There are some individuals, were some tables that had different designs, but the majority consensus of the tables indicated that they would be accepting of a new building, primarily residential, with ground floor retail and some service and community uses. There were varied building heights, but again, the majority consensus at the meeting was maximum of 6 stories. We heard some people wanted 4 and some people wanted 10 and upwards of 12, but maximum 6 seemed to be the majority consensus. Parking would be placed underground and to the rear of the building and appropriately buffered from adjacent properties. The site will have 2 vehicular access points, so one on Duke and one on Shanley. The site will have an enhanced public realm and streetscape. And the site's cultural heritage value will be respected. And lastly, the outdoor amenity space is important and will be provided on the site. So that could be at the front of the building or the back. So here is one of the, this is the concept drawing that Adam came up with, and it is a site plan drawing here, and it shows the maximum building volume. So this is the maximum development on the site. There could be a vision or a proposal that comes in that's less than this, but this is the maximum that we could see on the site. Here's a visual looking at the corner of Duke and Shanley. This is a view looking down the Duke Street side of the building. This would be the vehicular access on Duke. And this is the public realm or amenity area at the front of the building along Shanley Street. And those are that's my presentation for this evening. Thank you.
Sorry, for those in attendance, we're having to kind of do this back and forth because the main monitor for the chair is down, so I can't see the presentation, so I may have to do it again if anyone else has a presentation. So we'll move on to the delegations. If I can have Alain Rimmer. And welcome, and you have 5 minutes to make a presentation to committee.
I'm sorry, I have trouble hearing, but I have no trouble speaking. But I want to tell you that my name is Alan Rimmer. I live at 134 Shanley, which is directly next to 152 Shanley. And in the over 30 years I've been there, I've been very involved with this project, with this building, and what is happening to it. And bringing us up to the present time, I feel this is after 10 years of meetings in the City Hall here with our representative of the time and people from the city to discuss what should happen. But nothing, we had a sense, a lot of us in the neighborhood had a sense that the city was dragging its feet. And there was a lack of transparency in everything, and it's just come to pass now. I, 5 years ago, went to Toronto and did the title search of 152, and I got the names of all the players in these numbered companies, and I presented them to the record. I offered them to anybody with the city who was interested. I interviewed a fellow who lived in the building and worked for the proprietor, and he took me around and showed me all the other properties that the proprietor owned, and I searched them, and sure enough, this young fellow was telling the truth, but nobody was interested in what I found. I have it all here, piles of it. It's a lack of transparency, and quite a few of us have the feeling that the planning department and the politicians have already decided what they want, and this is it. And if you looked at the last aerial view, you can see it's a monstrous project in the middle of an ordinary neighborhood. And we don't want that. we certainly want something. And as you will hear, there's, the city's made no effort to clean up the pollution or get something initiated to clear up the pollution in the ground. And and the worst thing for me is the taxes that have never been collected, over $1 million with taxes and interest and services, because whenever there was a heavy snowfall, I'd be phoning the city because we have school kids and elderly people walking up to King Street with no snow clearance, so the city started picking up on that and mowing the grass and charging it all to the proprietors of this address. And so the piles have been adding up. So whatever's going to be developed there is starting with one arm tied behind its back, because you have $1 million worth of debt before we even begin. And that debt is being laid on the people of Kitchener and us in our neighborhood. The proprietor's not going to suffer, and the people who want to develop it, whoever they are and whatever they do, they're still going to have to absorb $1 million debt before they even begin. So what I'm asking for, I don't even know if what the city and the owner has done is even legal, and I'm going to find that out. To allow this debt to accumulate is outrageous for all of us. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. I see no questions. Oh, if we can just put our hands up so I know. Yes, Councillor Marsh.
Sorry, I thought it was working again. Okay.
Oh, it is?
It is. Okay, there we go. Thanks, Mr. Rimmer, for your presentation. I want to just better understand from you, do you think that the a numbered company owner, that the city is able to collect from a numbered company owner who happens to own other properties? I mean, do you feel like that is something that we'd be legally allowed to do?
I'm sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about because of my poor hearing and the acoustics here. But I've been involved all this time, going to endless meetings and seeing it pretty well decided. So, but the next speaker will be better able to answer your questions. I think he has full hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your opportunity to talk to you.
There is another question. Mr. Rimmer? Okay, all right. That's fine, that's fine.
I'm sorry?
If you want to try saying it, if he can't hear, if there's difficulty hearing, you can approach, or we can go on to the next delegation. It's just that I do want to give opportunity, if there's a question, that Mr. Rimmer does have an opportunity to say his full piece. Go ahead.
Mr. Rimmer, can you hear my question, or would you like me to come towards you to ask the question?
I'm sorry.
If you could. If you could.
Yep, no problem.
I have $4,000 hearing aids that aren't worth anything. Okay, what I would like to see...
If you can hold for a
town
sec,
halls.
if Councillor Fernandez can repeat that question, so all of us has heard it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my question of Mr. Rimmer was, what would he like to see on that site, given the fact that he believes that the numbered company should be responsible for the $1 million, but my focus is what is his vision for this site?
Yes, what I and some others would like to see is buildings that are no higher than the general neighborhood, and they could be townhomes, a series of townhomes with gardens around and parking, and something that blends right in with the existing neighborhood, which is an old neighborhood, and that's what I think most of us who live around there would favor, because this kind of structure is going to cut off privacy, certainly, and shadows are going to be cast over, and then traffic will be horrendous with this amount of space being taken up. So I hope that you will act critically in dealing with the planning department, who won't even say when we ask about this debt, it's confidential, they can't talk about it, and that bothers me. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, if the next delegation is Joel Noel. Again, as a reminder, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Joel Noel, and I moved into the neighborhood about 15 years ago. I own property at 143 Waterloo Street, where I reside with my family. It's about 350 meters from this, from 152 Chanley. I also own 4 other properties on Waterloo Street within 350 meters of this building. And I wanted to state my support of the vision statement for the development of this property, or the proposed development. We need someone to come in and clean this property up. I understand there's back taxes owned. I doubt that you'd be able to get it from a numbered company. I understand Mr. Reimer's concerns. The proposed development isn't much higher than it is right now at 4 stories. But whatever, if you can sell this property and get the land cleaned up, that would be a great improvement to the neighborhood. And I think that the property values in our neighborhood would go up with a development like this rather than go down as some people propose. So that's my say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next delegation is Chris Bear. Chris, thank you for coming forward. You have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. Everybody can hear me? The main point that I have is we've seen an unbelievable amount of construction taking place in our city over the past decade, and we've seen a relentless push to increase urban density in our city. But how does this benefit existing residents? The additional traffic on our residential streets is certainly of no benefit. The additional noise that we have from this many additional units is certainly no benefit to existing neighbors. The invasion of backyard privacy, when you have people peering down from the windows of a structure of this size, looking down into your backyard, I think you can agree most people would not be in favor of something like that. You simply can't build a fence high enough or plant a tree that grows tall enough to be able to block out a structure like that. So my primary issue is the overall size of the building, and in particular the height. Those are the issues that most of the residents, when I put out the petition, that was the primary concern, was the overall size. Even at 6 stories, it towers over the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. And I consider it to be a heritage neighborhood. There's houses in the neighborhood that are over a century old. So I think it's a neighborhood worth protecting. I think if there's going to be high-density construction, I know the city has to build more high-density construction. It needs to be restricted more to the downtown core. I mean, King Street, Queen Street. This is, you're in the middle of a pure residential area. There are no other structures of comparable size to this in the area. Excuse me, in the area. And there was an opportunity to build higher density structures between, for example, Margaret Avenue and St. Ledger. There was, somebody said it was 5 acres of land that was between there, and an entire neighborhood of townhouses went up in that area with a couple buildings of similar size to that, but they were in the middle of the property. They weren't placed at the edge of the property, so they weren't next to adjacent houses. The townhouses were. So you didn't have the same issues that you have with a structure like that. So again, that's the main concern that I have, and I think we still want to preserve some of that small town feel in Kitchener. I don't think we want to see our city become another Mississauga or another Toronto with all the problems that come with being a larger city. I think part of the appeal of Kitchener is that we don't have a lot of that here. We still have more green space and more open space. And when you look at that picture there, it looks so out of place in our neighborhood. And we're all in favor of the site being cleaned up and something being developed, but based on the petition that was signed by the residents most affected by that development, we want to see something smaller. And that's really the main issue. Thanks for your time.
There are some questions. First, Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Chris, for coming in. So I just wanted to understand, were you able to attend the charrette, and did you give some of your opinions?
No, I was unavailable for the original design charrette. I knew it was happening, but I wasn't able to make it to that.
Were you able to send in some of your ideas and concerns before the report was completed?
I think I had sent some comments in previously, but I may not have. It's possible that I didn't until the second meeting took place.
Okay, thanks. So I'm looking at this, and if I look at the house sort of to my left in this picture, it certainly does seem quite tall. What you're saying, you'd like to see townhouses? What other thing? I mean, considering the cost of the remediation, I think we may have to take into consideration that whoever develops this may want to get something out of it. The economy is of scale.
Correct, and it's my belief that I think the city or Ministry of the Environment, somebody is going to have to take on some of those pollution costs. I don't think it's reasonable to expect a developer to come in and take on all of those costs for the property. So it's unfortunate what happened, and in an ideal world, Electrohome or ArtRight, the company that polluted it originally, should have to pay for the cleanup. But they declared bankruptcy, whatever happened, but they weren't on the hook for it. So unfortunately, it falls now to the city to take on some of those costs. So I don't think we should have to accept a structure that is so large and out of place in the neighborhood as a result of the as a result of the pollution. Like, it seems like we're being penalized, and that if not for the pollution, something like this would not get made.
Okay, so I see where you're going to on this. If the building that we're seeing, and this is my understanding is this is just a conceptual drawing that one of our staff who is really good in doing this has come up with. But if we were to say, for example, just stay with the building in the brick area and not do the upper story, would that be more satisfactory to your community group?
I think that would be fine. If it could be built to a height that doesn't require the zone change. I think maybe the zone change is needed for a commercial first floor, if I'm correct. But I think if it could be kept to the height of the existing building, I don't think anyone would object to that, really. Okay. I certainly wouldn't object to it if it was kept to that same height. For me, the issue is the overall height.
Okay. And is this conceptual drawing showing roughly the same area that the original building is?
Actually, even if it were kept to the same height, the building would be twice as large as the existing building, because the existing building is only 4 stories at the corner of Duke and Shanley. The other wing of the building is only 1 story. So if this were to be built, it would already be, if you kept the same height, it would be a building that is twice the size of the building that's currently in place. So it would already be quite a culture shock to have double the building, and then to keep going on top of that, I think, is too much.
Okay, thank you for bringing in your concerns.
I mean, the concept drawing looks great, but it's...
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey, there's one more question.
Thanks.
No, there's one more person. Yeah, Councillor Davey. Yeah.
Chris, thank you. There's a clarification I hope you can provide that will help me in the decision. Without getting too deep into it, there is a program in place where the city does offset future taxation called a brownfield program. So we do help the future developer with the cost that would be associated with the cleanup. It's a program that I think works very well, but Councillor Fernandez touched upon the fiscal reality for this site as well. So assuming for the moment that the ministry and the city will not pay for the cleanup costs beyond that, and the decision for you is we go forward with something like this, or we leave the site vacant as is for another 15, 20, 30 years, what would your preference be?
You know what, in all honesty, the vacant site is quiet, and with the way the trees are in the back, like there are a few trees that kind of block part of it out. So it's an eyesore, but I've been living in the neighborhood for so long that it's, I've asked myself that question too. If I had to pick between that and what's currently there, I actually like it the way it is right now better than that. Even though, as much as I would like to see it get developed, and even though I feel that it's an eyesore and it's a blight on the neighborhood, and I'm sure it does hurt some of the home values around there, I think something like that would hurt home values even more.
Okay, thank you.
Than what's currently there. Thanks.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. And, sorry, not yet. Thank you for coming in, and Chris, thank you for leading the gathering of signatures on the petition. I think it's really, as I mentioned to you when we gathered a week ago, I really think it's a shame that we didn't hear from you until now, until after this vision was created, because it puts us in a tough spot, right? Of course, it's outrageous that there's a contaminated site that has been there for 20 plus years, and of course, that's not something that anybody should have to live with in their neighborhood. And so, what I'm wanting to better understand is. When you look at the building from your backyard, and you have trees that you said buffer the view. Thank you. When you look at your yard, which is, I don't think it's even in this picture, but can you? Do you really think that you would be? That 2 more stories would make it that much more visible from your yard?
Definitely 2 more stories, and the addition of a taller wing coming down that side would certainly make it more visible. My backyard would be the very upper leftmost corner of that picture.
Okay, the darker green there.
Correct. And I mean, I can see the building from out the window. It's almost blocked by those trees that you see at the top of the picture. But I'm looking at it as, you construct something of that height, there would definitely be people that would be able to look down from the windows into the surrounding backyards. That would be a privacy issue. I look at it as the additional, I know we kind of talked about the shade not being an impact, but I still think that would have an effect.
I think we're going to ask staff to show us the shade differential if we can
But
see that.
in fairness, so that's a minor thing. For me, the privacy thing is a much bigger thing, and the additional noise and the parking lot being right in behind there in close proximity to all the backyards and stuff, so.
Well, would you rather have building set further back than parking?
Well, this is why I've pushed for a smaller apartment building, or I've pushed for the idea of townhomes, or some sort of thing where you could keep the parking at the street instead of having the parking lot in behind, because, you know, for me, I think that would be a lot of traffic coming and going at all hours of the night for the units of that building, and I think that would also be something that residents, particularly on Stall and Allen on Shanley, I don't think they would be in favor of that, certainly.
Okay. I guess one last question. Would you be, let's say that against your choice, like let's say that this were approved, and let's say a developer did buy the property and clean it up and build something of something similar in scope, would adding more trees to your backyard, if we required the developer as part of the additional privacy measures, if we were to invite them to work with the neighbors to try to find ways to increase the privacy, would you be interested to see trees planted by them in your backyard?
I would be happy to see a few more trees planted there. I mean, where you would have to put them is actually not my yard. You would have to put them either in Alan's yard, or you'd have to put them the neighbor adjacent to me.
But
in
you'd
that
be
area.
open to that type of thing?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and even if you did that, I'm still not convinced that a tree would be enough to block a building of that height, because I've kind of walked around the city and looked at comparables, and I had a picture of a building that was kind of on King, Louisa, and Shanley, that area, and even at 6 stories, it completely towers over the surrounding houses. I mean, it totally dwarfs all of the other buildings around the neighborhoods. So it's really, that's really the key issue for me, is the height, the additional noise, the privacy, and the traffic that would create in the neighborhood, which, I mean, they're pretty narrow streets to begin with, and you would be doubling the amount of traffic on those roads, so.
Yep, okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. I don't see anyone else. Next up is Catherine Owens, please.
Chair Singh. I'm clicked in here. Yeah, questions of the last delegation.
I can't see who's clicked in. That's why I was requesting people to raise their hand. After this delegation, if you still feel compelled, I can request a previous delegation to come forward. But Ms. Owens, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Councillor Singh, members of the committee, good evening. My name is Catherine Owens. I live on Duke Street West, and I'm right at the bottom end of that building, not facing the building, but around the corner on Duke, but within 120 meters of the process. I wanted to use tonight's meeting as an opportunity to actually thank the planning department for all of the work that they have done on this Electrohome site this year. From organizing the charrette to doing follow-up meetings with individual members of the neighborhood, with preparing all of the documents that you have in front of you for circulation in the neighborhood, for subsequent information meetings, and all of the great work that they have done. So thank you to Elan, Tina, and Adam. And you're seeing the results of Adam's work. When we met with the planning department after the vision meeting, and they showed us the design, everybody went, ooh, oh, wow. And as Tina mentioned, we also took this design to one of our neighborhood meetings on the 8th of September. We actually set up an information booth specific to the Electrohome building, where we had copies of the vision statement. So I would say that there were probably 100 people at that neighborhood event who also had an opportunity to look at the design. Overwhelmingly, and I think Tina's captured captured the comments of most of the neighborhood is that they liked the design. It was an appropriate reflection of what the discussion was at the charrette. There are obviously some people in the neighborhood who would prefer not to have a building of that height or to have a building with retail, but overwhelmingly the feedback in the neighborhood is we like the concept of having retail there. The building didn't seem to be much higher than the current ones, and I think when we see the shadow studies, that will help us determine that. But I do want to thank them for all of the fabulous work they have done and keeping the neighborhood engaged in the process. I do want to reaffirm one of my other neighbors' comments that I live within the 120 meters and I am fully supportive of this design. I think it will add benefit to the neighborhood. We do understand that it is a conceptual model, and it may not look like that, but again, based on the feedback of the neighborhood, we have said to the city, please no more than 6 stories tall, and please recognize some of the heritage value of the neighborhood and incorporate some of those features there. So if you can find a developer that wants to take on the task of remediation and build a building of this design, I personally would be very supportive. I've also, though, given my comments back to the planning department, if those things do not happen, the homage to the heritage value of the building, or it's more than 6 stories tall, we would not be supporting that in the neighborhood. So that's it. Thank you for taking the time, and again, thank you for the planning department for all your hard work.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, if you don't mind, if you can come back. Councillor Councillor Ellington had a question. I hadn't noticed his hand up. Sure. Councillor Ellington, you can just press your speaking button and the mic goes on automatically this time.
I'm sorry, I missed your name.
Chris.
Chris, I was a little puzzled. Did you come into this late, or have you always been involved?
Yes, and I think many of the residents, especially on my street in that area, have also kind of come into this process a little bit late. There are a lot of people that did not attend the original design meeting, and I mean, if you've gone door to door and tried to, get people to sign a petition, you know how difficult it is to try to get people, especially to get out of their homes and come down for something like that. So it's my belief that, based on the petition, that vision statement does not represent the majority of what the neighborhood wants to see. And that's really my prime issue, is that it represents the views of the people that attended that meeting on that one particular day, but it doesn't represent the views of the people that live around the building. And the petition, I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time on the petition. I didn't have much time to get signatures, and I specifically only went around the area immediately around the building. I didn't go any further away than that, and the support was almost unanimous. A few people didn't answer the door, so I don't know whether they would have supported it or not, but virtually every house I went to, they supported the petition. So it was unanimous disapproval of that vision statement.
Do we have your petition?
I believe it's part of the public record.
It's along with the report.
I'm sorry?
It's in the report.
I missed it in the report. How many people do you think are affected by this proposal in the community?
How many people are affected by...
How many residents would be affected? How many residents does this have an impact on?
I think anytime you construct a building like this, the people most affected by it are the people that are immediately adjacent to the building. Sure. And then obviously as you go farther away from the building, the impact is lessened. I think residents within a 5 or 6 block radius are going to be affected by the traffic. Residents within a couple of blocks will be affected by the noise. Obviously, the residents immediately next to it are most affected by the privacy issues and the other concerns that I had that I had raised previously, so.
Okay. Thanks very much. And
Thanks.
sorry you had to come back.
Thank you, Chris. That's everyone. And that takes care of all the registered delegations. Now, with the presentation the staff had, if any questions of staff. Councillor Marsh?
So for the benefit of everyone in the room, I was wondering if staff have visuals of the shadow study results to show?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, we do. Let me take you to the first slide of the shadow study, and if the clerk would do me a favor and press play on that. It might go fairly quickly, so if you could just play it again if I'm still speaking about it, I'd appreciate that. Basically, what we see is a early morning shadow impact of about 2 hours on the nearby Stall Avenue properties, so those would be the ones immediately to the northwest. There's a similar impact on the adjacent Shanley Street properties. As you can see, like immediately adjacent, there's about a 2-hour impact very early in the morning. So you can see there's a time that cycles through to the top left there, so you can see what time of day we're looking at. It's also important to note that we're looking at the fall equinox in this scenario. We look at equinox conditions for shadow studies because it represents the midpoint between the summer solstice and the winter solstice, so it's the most even or representative time to take a shadow study from. The shadow impacts on the Duke Street sidewalk, which is another sort of important part of the public realm, those arrive at around 2 p.m., as you can see right there. So best practice with shadow studies is to preserve 5 hours of total sunlight access to the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street. In a condition like this, it would be the opposite side of Duke Street. So the sidewalk here, in this case, is shadowed by its own houses from about 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., so we can see as this restarts in the morning. If it restarts. So its own houses are shadowing that sidewalk on the opposite side of Duke Street from 6 a.m. till 9 a.m., and the shadow from the new building arrives at 2 p.m. So that actually, because it has no impact after 5 p.m. or so, it does preserve that 5 hours, so it meets that threshold, the criteria that we would normally use. It's a best practice used by municipalities all over North America as sort of passing a shadow study. Due to the building placement as well, as we talked about earlier, there's only about 2 hours of early morning shadow impact on the neighboring properties. So again, after about 9 a.m., those shadows have cleared all of the adjacent properties, in which case there are no longer any shadow impacts for the rest of the day.
Councilor Fernandez. Yeah.
I have to push.
Turn it on yourself.
So Adam, what we're seeing here is a conceptual drawing based on your expertise and possibly the economies of scale. Is that what you're taking a look at what the cost would be to remediate this from the city's perspective or from a developer's perspective?
So through you, Mr. Chair, this is a conceptual proposal that balances a lot of different factors, good urban design, aligning with the city's urban design principles, aligning with our planning principles, as well as considering the market or economic factors that are involved. So that includes site remediation, it includes things like residential floor plate efficiency, it includes the consideration for the fact that we may not be able to do residential units on a ground floor, which makes the additional height very important to achieve a number of units that could potentially be profitable for a development of this size, in this location with these number of constraints. And so it's an amalgamation of a lot of different factors, including the heritage preservation aspect, which was spoken to earlier, and good architectural design as far as massing, compatibility with the neighborhood. I know there's some disagreement on what form that takes, but this does sort of meet the threshold for our urban design objectives.
Okay. So it seems that the height, and you know, we've heard this many times from other development that is happening in the city. And when I look at the drawing on page, I guess we'll call it page, yeah, that one, great, thank you. When I look at this, I can see how I would feel if I was living in one of these houses, that I would be fine with sort of the brick part of the building. It's the upper story that I would be concerned about, because it really it would be a nice mix of old and new, and I think that that's what you were trying to accomplish. It just gives that building such a large massing, and we're talking about an L-shaped building, which is not what the building is now, is it? Is it an L-shaped building?
No, the original four-story portion is a square.
Just a square, yeah. So it does seem a lot larger because of that additional section. And so I can understand why the residents, especially the ones that are immediately adjacent, would feel like now we've gone from this old structure to this glass concrete structure where the brick is warmer. But we have to get a developer to buy into this, right? So that's the concern I have is, although this is a wonderful vision, are we going to have somebody who's willing to put that money into it? What if somebody comes in and says, you know what, by the time I take all of this pollution out of the ground, very, very minimum I would be willing to put in is a 7-story building? Where do we go from there?
Yes, so through you, Chair Singh, so just to sort of step back and understand what the purpose of the vision statement that staff developed in collaboration with the community is all about. It's to establish a vision that gives a certain level of certainty to a prospective owner of what the majority of the community is willing to accept, and that's what has been developed. That vision would accompany the next tax sale, and with an indication of what the vision statement represents. It is our hope that it will motivate someone to purchase the property and pursue something that aligns with the vision. It is possible that someone could acquire the property through the tax sale and apply for something that's different. However, the statement that we have something that manages the risk because we have a vision that has a large buy-in, not a total buy-in, and we know that because a few delegations here have made that very clear, means it's from square one. And if we do get applications, we will consider them. But we're starting from square one, just like we would from any other application that we don't know about until someone shows up on the counter on the 6th floor.
Right, okay. So one quick question, because my time is running out, is I believe it was Chris that said he thought that the rezoning was related to the ability to tie in retail as well as residential, but that site would be zoned industrial and commercial, or what is it zoned now?
Yeah, so right now it has a residential zoning which allows only residential uses in a maximum of 4 stories. The vision statement, which is supported by this illustration, allows non-residential uses on the ground floor and up to a maximum of 6 stories.
Okay. I might have some more additional questions.
Okay. Councilor Gazzola.
Does the current zoning we have now fit the vision?
Yeah, through your Chair Singh, no, it does not. In order to implement the full potential of the vision, a zone change and an official plan amendment would be required.
Okay. Right now, there are 27 people that have signed the petition that I would gather are opposed to this, and they, looking at the addresses, they're the ones that are in the immediate neighborhood that this has the greatest impact on. What does that mean to us when you have a majority of the people around it that are not supportive of the vision?
Through you, Chair Singh, we know there's opposition, but we've also heard from people who live within that same tight geographic area who are also supportive. We're presenting this to committee this evening as a vision that has broad support, not majority support. We have not had the opportunity to follow up with those who did not attend the charrette, did not attend the September 27th information meeting, to know the extent that they have awareness of all of the considerations involved, including the economics. But we did get a chance to follow up with those that have been in contact with us extensively, including those that appeared in delegation, and they actually understand all of the considerations. They did not participate in the charrette, but in follow-up, I think there are a small handful of people who know what's at play, but are just not supportive of 6 stories.
Okay. What is the RIENS program?
So the RIENS program is a framework that was approved by council that provides some direction on intensification in established neighborhoods.
Does it apply at all here? Like, it deals with the height of infill buildings and all of that, and setbacks. Does any of that apply here?
The major outcomes out of the RIEN in terms of real actionable items do not come into play here. Some of the principles would inform what we're doing here. Our RIENS is a general approach to general intensification as a rule of thumb. We are not dealing with this as a rule of thumb. This is a very isolated site-specific situation where we have a badly contaminated site, and the economics just don't lend themselves to approaching it on a normal basis. In order to motivate someone to acquire the property and remediate it, we need to come up with a thoughtful development that allows for a little bit more development potential than is perhaps typically the case in such a situation.
Okay. I want to ask a question. How did this ever originate? How did the planning, like I traveled around there, it's a totally residential area. How did we get a building like that there in the first place? Is that a stupid question, or is that...
In terms of how did the site get contaminated? We actually...
No, not how it got contaminated, but how did we get it's industrial, right? An industrial site right there in the middle of a residential area.
Okay, so that building goes back a long time, and in a lot of our older parts of the city, it was very typical for large places of employment to be cheek by jowl with residential developments, which is the case in this neighborhood. In fact, most of what is called the old Ward 1 has a lot of that as well, and that's how that neighborhood ended up being that way. It was actually quite typical. We have other parts of the city that have the similar interface between industrial buildings and residential buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Did you say that if we approve this, the site will still require an official plan amendment and a zone change?
It will require one if we end up getting a proposal that tries to maximize the potential of the vision statement. The vision statement allows a maximum height of up to 6 stories. They don't have to build up to 6 stories. If someone acquires the property and decides to do less, it could be that they do not need all of the amendments that and approvals that I've mentioned already.
Okay, so I haven't thought this through, so don't shoot me, but what would the risks be then if the intention of this is to eliminate or minimize the risk for a future potential developer? What would the risks be, or could the city proactively change the zoning and the official plan amendment before the property is disposed of?
So, through you, Chair Singh, that's a decision that we would want to make and evaluate only in response to a specific proposal, because there's a full range of potential approvals. Some of the approvals may lend themselves to the city initiating them. Some of the other ones actually do not lend themselves to the city actually taking the lead, but knowing that there is some broad support, it actually will, inform what that process may look like once we play it out. Depending on the proposal and what approvals are required, we'd have to look to see if there may be bonusing considerations that we would have to be careful not to get involved with.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez, going the second round.
Okay. This question, I see Mr. Sealing is in the audience, so I do have a question for him. I'm not sure if you attended the charrette, but I know that there was discussion both about preserving the facade of the building, but also the possibility of having to remove the facade because they wouldn't be able to do the remediation. In your opinion, have you been able to attend this building at any time in the recent timeline?
Mr. Sealing, yeah, it'll just turn on. You can speak.
Yes.
The mic is on.
Through the chair, I've driven by the property a number of times over the last few years. I have not been inside the building myself, so in terms of saving the facade, anything's possible, given that it can be done in a safe and manner. So, but I know it's a multi-wythe brick facade, but that's all that I know in terms of its structural capacity right now.
Okay, I just wanted to have again, one of our, Adam has put together a concept that includes the facade, so my concern would be if the neighborhood is buying into this concept and this vision, if in your opinion we couldn't preserve the facade, I would be concerned that people would feel, I don't want to use the word duped, but just that they would feel that they were misguided or they were not given all of the true facts. But since you haven't been in the building, you wouldn't be able to give us an expert opinion on that.
Unfortunately, I haven't been in the building.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yeah, I just want to be clear on this. In order for, when it comes to the risk, in order for it to move forward as a 6-story capacity, it has to have a zone change in an official plan amendment. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair Singh, that is correct.
Okay.
If I may, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just, in order to help Councillor Galloway-Sealock and all of my colleagues to consider this risk, I want to remind Council, if I may, that back on November 6th in 2017, Council adopted a motion whereby we said that that first we would undertake the neighborhood charrette, which we've done, and then we would develop a vision or criteria, which is here, to be used as the foundation for a city-facilitated zone change and other possible planning approvals after the successful sale of the property and upon receipt of a bona fide redevelopment proposal that meets the vision criteria. So therefore, it's an incentive for developers to decrease their risk, that if they develop a plan that is in line with in large part in line with our vision statement here that we would be approving, then the city would initiate the zone change, and that's less of a risk.
Thank you. That's not really where I was going with this, but thanks anyways. That helps. So the zone change would only happen if it goes from 4 to 6 stories?
If the, yeah, and only in response to a specific proposal. We wouldn't want to allow that until we're assured of the end product. But also if the proposal was to include non-residential uses as well.
It's industrial.
Right.
So it's both a use and a height.
Okay. But if somebody wanted to come forward with a 4-story proposal, all residential, they could do that?
They could do that
They don't need a zone
with
change.
the current zoning. They would require other approvals, like a heritage impact assessment would be required. And of course, because residential is a sensitive use, they would need a record of site condition.
Right, right. So ideally, it comes back to, and this might end up turning into a comment, it comes back to that some residents would like to see it stay 4, some are okay if it goes 6, but it has the potential still to move forward as a 4-story building because they wouldn't have to go through necessarily all the other approval process. And so I see this as a good vision in order to move forward to try and maximize the site, but there is potential that the site won't get this density that is in our vision statement. And so I guess I just wanted to say that I support the vision statement because I think there's still an opportunity for it not to go to 6 stories and stay at 4, or it may go to 6, and I'm supportive either way.
Thank you. I'll take that as your comment. Just for clarity, though, the current site is zoned industrial. Is it not?
The current site was recently designated low-rise residential with a site-specific policy in the new official plan, but it does have an R6 zoning at the present time.
Okay. And that's where the 4-story would be compliant then?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. That helps. Councillor Marsh, did you still have a question? You had your hand up before.
Yeah. All right. So when it comes to the height of the building, I just want to ask staff to let us know, currently the 4-story building that is L-shaped because it does have that single story that extends where the additional building is proposed. I'm trying to understand what would be the likely height of the proposed vision if it were 6-story.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the height could vary depending on the development pro forma and what kind of floor-to-floor would be achieved, and that's particularly dependent on what happens on the ground floor, whether the existing building remains in part as a facade or if it's reconstructed entirely. So it's hard to give a very specific answer, but between 19 and 21 meters would be the height of a 6-story building according to a proposal such as this one, or a concept such as this one.
Okay, and then I see some significant setback along the side that we see in this image here on the screen. Can you help us to know approximate meters of setback for the side and for the one that's facing Duke?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. What is proposed here is an approximate 3-meter step back for the 5th and 6th stories. That's a mitigation measure for shadows, for wind, and for privacy. We find generally that if you step back upper stories, the views of the occupants tends to go out further than its immediate neighbor. They tend not to look down into the neighbor, particularly if you don't provide outdoor balconies that occupy that step back space. It means that the lip of the building below essentially blocks the view into the neighboring property.
So there are, and you've decreased the number of windows, and did you say no balconies along that section that's the top of the L?
Correct. That's something that hasn't necessarily been worked out in 100% detail. It would be potentially possible to do a balcony at the corner where it would have no impact on the neighboring properties, but say to the top left of this image or like sort of straight ahead, that would certainly be a place where we could not provide a balcony in order to preserve privacy. As well, due to some of the neighborhood feedback after our September session, we did look at adding more opaqueness to the side of that building such that there were no windows looking immediately adjacently into the neighboring backyard for additional privacy.
Okay, thank you. And then I was also wondering about the, what was I wondering about? I was wondering about the, when it comes to the, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry, I'll have to come back and comment.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola.
We've not been provided with any economic background that was used in dealing with this vision. Is that correct? Well, I'll say it's correct.
So through you, Chair Singh, no, there's nothing that we've, provided to council. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And the follow-up question on that is who did that? Who did that economic assessment as to what would be viable there? Do we have the in-house expertise that dealt with that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to let Mr. Reedman field this one, but we actually do, and I'll let him.
Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, so we do have staff that did a very rough calculation in terms of a lot of assumptions that were made based on the cost of contamination and other factors. And that information is not public because it could affect the viability of the tax sale.
No, and that's fine. That's all I wanted to know. So we have people that have done that before and have some experience in coming up with those figures. That's fine. I just wanted to know if we did.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions of staff. I will take a mover for the item moved by Councillor Davey. Move on into comments. Councillor Davey?
Sure, yes. I would just want to start by saying I was actually quite impressed by the vision statement and from how staff went about it to the final statement itself. I think it's interesting, so we haven't actually had, I don't think we've ever had anything like this, at least in my years in council, where we've tried to solve a problem quite like this with the community support. So I would also say that I think this is something that I really hope committee supports, because I've heard from the residents that some of them would like it to be fewer stories, but my sense is that when we start cutting down floors, what we're really doing is just throwing our hands in the air and saying there's a possibility that this building is going to stay derelict for we don't even know how long, many, many years. So by coming through and saying that there is a way that a developer could potentially acquire this property and potentially, have a business model for it, we're solving the problem of us having to deal with this issue over a number of years, as well as potentially, resolving the sort of the neighborhood community problems by having them provide so much great input on it. I don't know all of the economics behind it, but I do get the sense that it is going to be tight because of the environmental challenges. I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I would be surprised if someone even took up on what we have here with the heritage. There's going to be some costs with respect to the heritage, and we're not exactly going up a huge number of stories, so there could be some definite challenges for the developers, but I think staff in the community have put their best foot forward, and now it's up to the private sector to see if they can make something here.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I just want to start off by thanking the residents for coming in and all those residents that have participated in this process. I also want to thank Councillor Marsh for her participation in helping facilitate this, as well as I want to thank staff for the great detail and effort that they put into this. And really, I think this is something that is quite a tall order for us to come together as a community and as the city to work on this property. And I want to be optimistic, and I think at the end of the day, we're hoping that someone will look at this property and see that the vision statement is something that is is compatible to the community, but also will be an economic viable option for them. But again, I do want to raise some caution to the neighborhood. Anyone who does take on this property, there will be some significant risks to that individual. So I'm just glad to see that. I think that there is enough density here to make this a viable option.
Councilor Gazzola. Oh, sorry, Fernandez first.
Thank you. This is certainly a unique way of finding a solution to a very, very challenging problem that has plagued that community, your community, for a long time. And, you know, having a charrette, having public come in and discuss what their vision is, how they see their community changing and addressing a site that is an eyesore for many years is probably very innovative and very thinking outside the box. So I certainly give accolades to our planning staff for doing that. And Adam's design is although it's not necessarily super appealing to myself and maybe not to some of the residents, just me personally, Adam, nothing to do with you, it does offer both a variety of residential living, possible some of those small store, small business feelings that used to be in that neighborhood years and years ago, when you'd have that corner store and that butcher and that the grocer and you know, maybe the little pharmacy. So I think you are trying to incorporate everything that used to be in that community, and I think that's a really great thing. Speaking to the residents who don't support this, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think that it's probably frustrating to you when you see a lot of support for something that you don't feel is going to fit in with your neighborhood. But I'm seeing this as a conceptual drawing, and I'm seeing that it's a good sort of hook to hopefully bring a developer into your community who will be willing to take on the remediation, who will be willing to change this from a derelict site to a viable, interesting community that neighbors will come and live there, families will come and live there. And I think when I read Ms. Parker's submission that she sent to us, I think she has some very good comments about how this is a new construction in Midtown where you can walk and bike to bakeries. It's close to the spur line, it's close to School of Pharmacy, it's within walking distance to the transit hub. And that's all of the things that we talk about all the time about when we build a complete community, even if it is all in one structure. Thanks for the visioning. I think I'd love to see this, more of this in some of our other sort of brownfield sites as we move through infill within our community. I am going to support the visioning. I think it is the right direction for this particular site at this particular time.
Councilor Gazzola.
Thank you. Yeah, I normally don't like to make big decisions without knowing some of the economic factors, if not all of them, but I can see where we're going here, and I will support it. We have to move forward. When we have contamination on our land, in the city, we have to someday do something with it. It can't just be left like that. It has to be corrected, and there's been a lot of hard work has already been done on this. There's a lot of information. This is a public meeting. People that will, some perhaps be interested when it goes into a tax sale, can do all their homework, and they can see that there are a number of residents that are not totally in favor of things the way they appear now. So that's wide open out there. We're being transparent. And someone that hopefully will be interested can get all the information and make their decision going forward. As it often stands, I know one of the things that people often get concerned about is the market value of their own properties going down. in many cases, if a project is done properly, it can cause a market property, their own properties, to go up. So it's not a one-way street. So in final, I will be supporting where we're going.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleagues around the Horseshoe for considering this file that I've been working on since I started as a councillor, working on understanding, first of all, the parameters, speaking with Leslie for hours about why is it that we have this contaminated site, and why can't we just force the owner to clean it up? And I know that if we could, we would. I also want to thank the planning staff, who and several of them took half of their Saturday back on April 28th to come and facilitate at the tables for the charrette. And they were a part of making this as much of a community-based decision as possible. I was disappointed when I saw the petition come out, because I was really uplifted by the fact that so many neighbors were supportive of the project. Of course, it's natural to have some opposition to any major project, and so I do commend the residents for bringing their voices and making them heard. I personally am committed to enforcing the 6-story maximum. I don't think that this neighborhood could support something higher than 6 stories. And 6 stories, it is dense. It absolutely is dense. But I do think that it is something that makes it possible. So when I look at this project, and I think it's something that makes it attractive enough to a developer to take that risk of cleaning up the contamination that has been a blight on our community for so long. At one point, I'm not sure at what point we need to do this, but we need to make a note that even though we committed to having the tax sale process tendered prior to the end of 2018, that this, because of the timing of how this worked out, it's going to have to start at the beginning of 2019, just a couple weeks late. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
Councillor Marsh, because that was the direction from Council back from November 2017, I think that would be good if you were to bring as an amendment, so that it extends into January 2019. But before we do that, because it was already passed for December, end of December, we'll need a motion to reconsider by Councillor Ioannidis. I think through committee, and then it goes to council that way. Exactly. So we'll go through the comments, and then so initially from the November 6th to 2017, it was to be reported back for December, end of December, and now we're extending into January. More time would be required for the tax sale to move forward. Is everyone on board? Okay. Those with better minds in this regard have said yes. So I'll come to that after the comments are finished. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted quickly to say that I really like the concept of these charrettes, and would encourage staff and council to get involved in more of this. I think it's too bad that we have a situation where we have a split in residence. It's predictable. And I would like very, very much to see more residents involved in this charrette-type experience. I think we need to do, as a city, we need to make more effort to reach to a wider audience of people. You can't force people to come out to meetings, but I think we can do more to establish a situation where they do feel that they should be at these kind of meetings. I'm going to support this proposal, knowing some of the background and some of the disastrous history of this building, and quite honestly, the disastrous way the city has handled this building over the years. But I would say that if anything came back from the development industry that went above a 6-story building, I would, how can I phrase this? I would oppose it. Of course, I won't have the chance to oppose it because I won't be on the council. But I'll make bloody certain that the person replacing me knows my views in any kind of proposal that would go above 6 stories, because I don't think that would fit with this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eddington, and that's all the comments. I'll quickly make mine. I think this was a really unique exercise. That was effort for it to be collaborative, and it would have been fantastic if the whole neighborhood had bought into this. But I appreciate change can be difficult, and what's proposed through the vision statement does add additional height, and that could be impactful to some residents in this neighborhood. But I don't think we should fail to focus on the fact that this building, the way it sits, has been, as said previously, a blight in this neighborhood. And that's quite unfortunate, and because it's a wonderful community, wonderful neighborhood. Having the site sit the way it does and having those contaminants underground is not a benefit to anyone. I think this entire exercise was also informative because staff were able to clarify that the current zoning already does allow residential for 4-story. And we've already tried and went through previous tax sales. So if there was enough interest through the development community of seeing such, of that density of 4-story, that would have already happened, but that hasn't been successful. So we have to endeavor to achieve a higher density there. At the same time, a balanced approach, as said also earlier from my colleagues, that I think beyond 6-story would not make sense in this neighborhood. But again, there needs to be more density for this to be a viable project, a business case for a developer to move forward. Because even with the brownfield incentives, environmental remediation is a tremendous undertaking. So compliments to staff of approaching this in the way that they did, and try to be as collaborative as possible. My hope is that whatever is built in the future is more to line to satisfaction of the entire neighborhood. I think it will be a positive change, and hopefully there will be a developer that sees what we are putting forward as something that's attractive, and we can have a redevelopment of this parcel sooner than later. So with that, I'm going to take the motion to reconsider first, moved by Councillor Ioannidis. We need 6 members for it to pass. All those in favor? Opposed? And the motion to reconsider passes. And the amendment is from Councillor Marsh. Do you want to state it?
Sure.
Okay.
Just that advertisement of the property at 152 Shanley under the tax sale process take place in January 2019.
Excellent. If that's clear, all those recorded vote.
Sorry, I'm being asked by Ms. McDonald that it shall commence in January 2019 because it's a 30-day process, and if it starts after January 1st, it'll go into February. So
okay. Staff are satisfied with the amendment? Excellent. A recorded vote. And that's unanimous. Thank you. On to the original motion as amended, has been moved by Councillor Davey, and also recorded vote. And that too is unanimous. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the delegates for coming forward, and this will move on to the next council meeting. There is a special council, and Councilor Schneider, I believe do you want to come here, or do you want to do
I think I'm supposed to stay here.
Okay.